Welcome to Funny, Fun Audiobook Gala. This is a place for real stories. True stories, the kind people carry quietly for years, until they can't stay silent anymore. Today, you're going to hear from someone named Margaret. She's 74 years old. And every morning, for the past 6 years, she does something that most people wouldn't understand. She sets the table for 3, even though she eats alone. This story is called, I'm 74 and I still set the table for 3. This isn't a story about moving on. It's not about healing or hope or finding the light. It's about what happens when the people you love are gone, but you're not ready to let go. It's about grief, routine, and the small rituals we create to survive. Margaret doesn't have answers. She doesn't have advice. She just has 3 plates, 3 chairs, and the truth she's finally ready to say out loud. So if you're ready, take a breath, get comfortable, and listen. Here's Margaret.
My name is Margaret. I'm 74 years old. Every morning, I set the table for 3. 2 plates on one side, 1 on the other. 3 forks, 3 knives, 3 glasses. I've been doing this for 6 years now. Even though it's just me, I'm not confused. I know they're not coming back. I know my husband is gone. I know my son is gone. But I set the table anyway, because stopping feels like admitting something I'm not ready to admit. That they're really gone. That I'm really alone. That this is what the rest of my life looks like. I'm recording this because I don't know how much longer I can keep doing it. Not the table setting. I'll probably do that until I can't stand anymore. But they're pretending that it's normal. That it's just a habit. That it doesn't mean anything. It means everything. I need to tell you about them. About David, about Ben, about the life we had, and the life I'm still living in my head, because that's where they are now. In my head. At that table, David and I got married when I was 22. He was 24. We met at a church social. He asked me to dance, and I said yes, even though I didn't really know how. He didn't either. We stepped on each other's feet the whole time, but we laughed. And that was enough. We got married 6 months later. Everyone said it was too fast, that we didn't know each other well enough. But we didn't care. We had a small wedding, just family. A cake my mother made, a bouquet from the grocery store, and we were happy. Really happy. We rented a tiny apartment on the 2nd floor of an old building. 1 bedroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. The bathroom had green tile that was cracked in 3 places. But it was ours. David worked at a factory. I worked at a bakery. We didn't have much money, but we had enough. Enough for rent, enough for food, enough to save a little bit each month. We had a jar on the kitchen counter. We'd put our spare change in it. We called it the someday jar. Someday we'd buy a house. Someday we'd take a trip. Someday we'd have kids. Ben came 3 years later. We weren't trying. We weren't not trying. It just happened. And suddenly, our little apartment felt even smaller. But we were so happy. I remember the first time David held them. Ben was so tiny. His whole body fit in David's arms. David looked at me and said, "We made this." And I started crying, not sad crying, just ... overwhelmed crying. because it was true. We made him, this little person who didn't exist before. And now he did. We moved into a bigger place when Ben was 2. A small house on the edge of town, 2 bedrooms, a yard. It wasn't fancy. The roof leaked when it rained hard. The heater didn't always work, but it was ours. That's when I started setting the table for 3. Before that, it was just me and David. We'd eat on the couch sometimes, or standing in the kitchen. But once Ben was old enough to sit in a chair, I wanted us to eat together as a family. So I'd set the table every night. 3 plates, 3 forks, 3 glasses, and we'd sit together and talk about our day. David would tell Ben about work. Ben would tell us about preschool. I'd tell them about the people who came into the bakery, the regulars, the stories. It was simple, ordinary, but it was everything. Ben grew up fast. One day he was learning to tie his shoes. The next, he was in middle school. Then high school. Then he was packing boxers and moving into a dorm 3 hours away. David and I stood in his empty room after we helped him move. All his posters were gone. His bed was stripped. The closet was empty. I said, "The house feels so quiet." David said, "He'll be back for holidays." And he was. For a while, but then he graduated, got a job, got an apartment in the city. He'd call every week, come visit every few months, but it wasn't the same. The table felt too big with just 2 of us, but I still set it for 3. Because maybe he'd surprise us. Maybe he'd show up unannounced. He never did, but I kept hoping. David got sick when he was 61. It started with a cough that wouldn't go away. Then he started losing weight, getting tired more easily. I made him go to the doctor. The doctor sent him to a specialist. The specialist sent him to another specialist. And then we were sitting in an office, holding hands, listening to words like stage 4 and inoperable and months, not years. I remember the drive home. Neither of us said anything. We just sat in the car in the driveway for a long time. Finally, David said, "I'm sorry." I said, "For what?" He said, "For leaving you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just held his hand. He lasted 8 months, longer than they thought he would. We spent most of that time at home. In our house, at our table, I'd make his favorite meals. Even though he could barely eat, I'd set the table for 3, even though Ben couldn't always make it. And we'd sit together and talk. Or not talk. Just be. Last week, he couldn't get out of bed. Hospice brought in a hospital bed and set it up in the living room. I slept on the couch next to him. Ben took time off work and stayed with us. David died on a Tuesday morning. I was holding his hand. Ben was holding his other hand. He took a breath, and then he didn't take another one. And that was it. 61 years old, 40 years of marriage. Gone. After the funeral, Ben stayed for a week. He helped me sort through David's things, pack up his clothes, cancel his subscriptions, all the administrative parts of death that no one prepares you for. The night before he left, we had dinner together. I set the table for 3. Out of habit, Ben looked at the empty chair and said, "Mom, you don't have to do that," I said. "I know, but I didn't move the plate. After Ben left, I kept doing it. I'd wake up, make coffee, set the table for 3. I'd eat breakfast, alone, at one of the 3 places. Then I'd clear the table, wash the dishes, put everything away, and the next morning, I'd do it again." People noticed. My sister came to visit a few months after David died. She saw the table and didn't say anything at first. But later, she pulled me aside and said, "Margaret, are you okay?" I said, "I'm fine." She said, "You're setting the table for 3. I said, "I know," she said, "but it's just you now." I said, "I know." She didn't push it, but I could see the worry in her eyes. A year passed. Then, too, I kept setting the table. 3 plates, 3 forks, 3 glasses every single day. Ben would call and ask how I was doing. I'd say, "Fine." He'd say, "Are you eating okay?" I'd say, "Yes." He'd say, "Are you getting out? Seeing people?" I'd say, "Sometimes." It was mostly true. I went to church. I went to the grocery store. I saw my sister once a month. But most of the time, I was home at that table with 2 empty chairs. 3 years after David died, Ben called with news. He'd met someone. Her name was Rachel. They were serious. He wanted me to meet her. I said, "Of course, bring her for dinner." I spent 2 days preparing. I cleaned the house. I cooked David's favorite pot roast. I set the table for 4. It felt strange, adding a 4th plate, like I was making room for someone new, like I was moving forward. I wasn't sure I wanted to. Day came. On a Saturday, Rachel was lovely, polite, kind. She brought flowers. We sat at the table and ate and talked. Ben told stories. Rachel laughed. Primera smiled. But the whole time, I kept looking at David's empty chair, wishing he was there, wishing he could see this. Our son, happy, in love. After dinner, Ben helped me with the dishes. Rachel was in the living room, looking at old photo albums. Ben said, "She really likes you, Mom." I said, "I like her too." He said, "I'm thinking about asking her to marry me." I stopped washing the plate I was holding. I said, "That's wonderful, honey." He said, "Do you think Dad would have liked her?" I said, "Yes, he would have loved her." Ben smiled. Then he said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" I said, "Of course." He said, "Why do you still set the table for 3? I didn't answer right away. I rinsed the plate, dried my hands, looked at the table. "Finally," I said, "because it makes me feel like you're both still here." Ben didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "But I'm not there, Mom. I'm here, in the city, living my life." I said, "I know." He said, "And Dad's not coming back." I said, "I know that too." He said, "So why are you waiting?" I didn't know how to answer that, because I wasn't waiting. Was I? They left the next morning. Ben hugged me tight and said, "I love you, Mom. I said, "I love you too." Rachel hugged me and thanked me for dinner. I watched them drive away, and then I went back inside, to the quiet house, to the table set for 3. That night, I sat in David's chair. I'd never done that before. I always sat in my spot, across from his empty chair. But that night, I sat where he used to sit, and I looked at where I usually sat, and I tried to see what he saw. From his chair, I could see the whole room, the kitchen, the hallway, the front door. I could see the pictures on the wall, the ones of Ben as a kid, of our wedding day. I could see my empty chair, and I realized, he was always looking at me. Every dinner, every conversation, he was looking at me. I started crying, not because I was sad. Well, I was sad, but also because I missed him so much. I missed the way he looked at me, the way he listened, the way he laughed at my bad jokes. I missed him sitting across from me, and I realized that setting the table for 3 wasn't keeping him here. It was keeping me stuck. The next morning, I set the table for 2, just to see how it felt. I put 1 plate where I always sat, and 1 plate where Ben used to sit when he was a kid. I left David's spot empty. It felt doubly wrong, like I was erasing him. So I put the 3rd plate back, and I sat down and ate breakfast alone, at a table set for 3. A few months later, Ben called. He and Rachel were getting married. They wanted a small wedding, just close family and friends. He asked if I'd help with the planning. Primera, siya yes. The wedding was beautiful, simple, in a little garden, just 30 people. Ben wore a navy suit. Rachel wore a cream-colored dress. They wrote their own vows. Ben cried. Rachel cried. I cried. During the reception, Ben danced with Rachel. Then he came over and asked me to dance. We swayed slowly to some song I didn't recognize. He said, "I wish Dad was here." I said, "Me too," he said, "but I'm glad you are." I said, "Me too." After the wedding, they moved to a bigger apartment. They talked about buying a house, starting a family. Life was moving forward for them. I went home to my quiet house, to my table set for 3. And I kept living the same day over and over. For years after David died, I had a health scare. I collapsed at the grocery store. They called an ambulance, ran tests. Turned out my blood pressure was dangerously high. I was dehydrated, malnourished. The doctor said, "Mrs. Patterson, you're not taking care of yourself." I said, "I'm fine." He said, "You're not. You're barely eating. You're isolating. This can't continue." Ben came to stay with me for a few days after I got out of the hospital. He was worried. I could see it in his face. He made me promise to eat better, to see my doctor regularly, to call him if I needed anything. I promised. But after he left, I went back to my routine. Wake up, set the table for 3, eat a little, clear the table, repeat. One morning, about 6 months ago, I was setting the table. I put down the first plate, then the second. I reached for the third, and I just stopped. I stood there, holding the plate, looking at the empty chair, and I thought, who is this for? David's been gone for 6 years. Ben hasn't lived here in over 20 years. This plate isn't for them. It's for me. It's for the life I'm not ready to let go of. I put the plate back in the cabinet. I set the table for one, and I sat down and cried. I only set the table for one that day. The next morning, I set it for 3 again. Old habits. But something had shifted. I started noticing things I hadn't noticed before. How heavy the silence was. How empty the house felt. How much of my life I was spending ... waiting. Not for them to come back. I knew they weren't coming back, but waiting for something, some feeling, some sign that it was okay to move on. I started thinking about time. How much of it I'd already spent. How much I might have left. I'm 74. My mother died at 70. My father at 81. If I'm lucky, I might have another 10 years. Maybe less. And I've spent the last 6 years sitting at a table set for people who are you and there. I don't regret loving them. I don't regret missing them. But I think I regret ... Pausing my life because theirs ended. Or because his life moved forward without me. About 3 months ago, my sister invited me to join her book club. I said no at first. I didn't want to meet new people. I didn't want to make small talk. I didn't want to pretend to be okay. But she kept asking. Finally, I said yes, just to get her to stop. The first meeting was awkward. There were 6 women, all around my age, all widows or divorces. They were kindi. They didn't ask too many questions. We talked about the book. We drank tea. We ate cookies someone had baked. It was ... night. At the end, one of the women, Linda, asked if I wanted to come back next month. I said, maybe. She said, I hope you do. It's nice having someone new. I went home that night and thought about it, about how easy it would be to say no, to stay home, to stay at my table, to keep things the way they'd always been. But I went back the next month, and the month after that, and now I go every month. I'm not saying it fixed everything. I still set the table for 3 most mornings. I still miss David every single day. I still wish Ben lived closer, but I'm starting to realize ... This is my life now, not the life I had. Not the life I thought I'd have. This one, and I can either keep living in the past, or I can try to live in the present. Last week, I had the book club over to my house. I almost cancelled. I almost said I was sick because I didn't want them to see the table, the 3 plates, the 3 chairs. But I didn't cancel. I cleaned the house primera de coffee. I bought cookies from the bakery. And when they arrived, I brought them into the dining room. Linda saw the table and didn't say anything at first. Then she sighed. You set a beautiful table, Margaret. I looked at it. 3 plates, 3 forks, 3 napkins, and I said, thank you. We had a nice afternoon. We talked about the book. We talked about our lives. We laughed. It felt good. When they left, I cleared the table. I washed the dishes. I put everything away. And then I stood there, looking at the empty table. And I thought, maybe tomorrow I'll set it for one. I haven't yet, but I think about it. Ben called yesterday. He and Rachel are expecting a baby. A little girl due in for months. He was so excited. I could hear it in his voice. He said, "You're going to be a grandmother, Mom." I said, "I know," he said. "We want you to be a big part of her life." I said, "I'd like that." After we hung up, I sat at the table, at my spot, looking at the 2 empty chairs. And I thought about the future, about a little girl who'll never meet her grandfather, but who'll know me, who I can tell stories to, about David, about Ben when he was little, about the life we had. And I thought, maybe that's enough. Maybe I don't have to let go completely. Maybe I can carry them with me in my stories, in my memories, but not at this table, not in these empty chairs. I don't know when. I'll stop setting the table for 3. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe never. But I'm starting to understand that it's not about the table. It's about me, about whether I'm ready to live the life I have, instead of the life I lost. I'm 74 years old. I've been a wife, a mother, a widow, and now I'm just Margaret. And I'm trying to figure out what that means. I still set the table for 3 most days, but some days I don't. Some days I eat standing at the counter, or on the couch with a book, or at a friend's house. And those days, the table stays empty. And that's okay, because I'm learning that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean I loved them any less. It just means I'm making room for new memories, new people, new moments. Room for the life I still have left to live. I don't know how much time I have, none of us do, but I know I don't want to spend it all sitting at a table set for ghosts. So I'm trying. Some days are harder than others. Some days I wake up and the grief is so heavy I can barely move. But other days I wake up and I feel something else. Not happiness exactly, but maybe possibility. I'm recording this because I needed to say it out loud. I needed to admit that I've been stuck, that I've been living in a moment that's already past, and that I'm ready, or at least I'm trying to be ready, to live in this moment, the one I'm in right now. I don't have answers. I don't have wisdom to share. I just have this: a table, 3 chairs, and a choice I make every morning. If you're still listening, thank you. I know this isn't an easy story. It's not inspiring. It's not uplifting. It's just true. Maybe you've lost someone too. Maybe you're stuck in a moment you can't let go of. Maybe you're setting your own table for people who aren't there anymore. I don't know. But if you are, I understand. And I hope you find your way forward. Whatever that looks like. For me, it looks like this: one day at a time. One plate, at a time, one breath at a time. Thank you for being here, for listening to an old woman talk about plates and chairs and grief. I hope it meant something. Or maybe it didn't. Either way, thank you. If this story touched you in some way, I'm glad you were here to listen. My name is Margaret. I'm 74 years old. And this was something I needed to say. Thank you for sitting with me, for listening to a story about grief and tables, and the small ways we try to hold on. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, real, honest, human stories from people who've lived long enough to understand what truly matters, you can find them right here on Funny Fun Audiobook Gala. We don't tell you how to live. We don't give you lessons or inspiration. We just share the truth, the kind that comes from years of living, of losing, of learning too late. If Margaret's story stayed with you, please subscribe to Funny Fun Audiobook Gala. Press the like button and share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Maybe it's someone who's grieving. Maybe it's someone who's stuck. Maybe it's someone who sets their own table for people who aren't coming back. Your support helps us keep sharing these stories, these voices, these truths that deserve to be heard. And if you want to tell us your thoughts, if this story reminded you of your own life, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What are you holding on to? What table are you still setting? You don't have to share, but if you want to, we're listening. The next story will be here soon. Another voice, another truth, another moment someone finally found the courage to say out loud. Until then, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. This is Funny Fun Audiobook Gala, where real stories find their voice.